He didn't fight. He didn't fall. He simply vanished a ghost in the celestial tapestry as heaven itself fractured. When constellations trembled and starlight dimmed, cowed by a fear unknown in paradise, one angel stood muted, a statue carved from divine sorrow. Gabriel, the voice of God, the herald of truth. The being who breathed light into existence found himself voiceless, while Michael, a warrior forged in celestial fire, raised his incandescent blade, and Lucifer, blindingly beautiful even in his rebellion, brandished his pride like a newly forged weapon. The messenger of the Almighty was nowhere to be seen, a silent enigma in the face of cosmic conflict. He aligned neither with the unwavering loyalists, nor did he rally to the banner of the defiant rebels. He dissolved instead into the deafening silence that yawned between them, a chasm of untold stories and unanswered prayers. And strangely, amidst the chaos, no one dared to question his absence. What force, after all, could possibly silence the very voice of heaven? Was it a fear so profound it paralyzed even the angels? Was it an unwavering loyalty so absolute it demanded obedience above all else? Or was it a divine command, a whisper from the Creator so potent that even the celestial host dared not challenge its inscrutable purpose? Perhaps God himself decreed Gabriel's silence, deeming it a crucial, albeit mysterious element in the unfolding drama. Perhaps silence in this instance was not passive inaction, but a weapon of unimaginable power, a strategic withdrawal to allow a grander, more intricate plan to unfold. Or perhaps, and this was the most unsettling possibility of all, Gabriel was witnessing something that shattered him irrevocably, a truth so devastating a sorrow, so profound, that it rendered him incapable of speech, unable to reconcile the beauty he knew with the heartbreak he was forced to confront. Something that heaven, in its pristine glory, was never meant to feel, never meant to comprehend the agonizing weight of sorrow, the crushing burden of loss. You know, the familiar chronicle of the fall, the epic poem of Lucifer's vaulting ambition and Michael's righteous triumph. But this is not that tale. This is the untold story, the secret history whispered in the hushed corners of creation, the ballad of the silent observer, the angel who carried every divine decree, every whispered promise, until the day heaven itself descended into a cacophony of silence. Before the universe took form, before the relentless march of time began its unwavering cadence, there was sound, not the jarring clamor of chaos, but a breathtaking symphony of harmony. The heavens did not simply speak, they sang. Each star, a shimmering jewel in the inky blackness, resonated with its own unique note, contributing to the celestial chorus. Each angel was a chord perfectly pitched, flawlessly interwoven, creating a tapestry of sound so exquisite it defied description. And God himself, the architect of existence, was the melody, the driving force behind this breathtaking symphony, the source of its unparalleled beauty. And leading this divine orchestra, conducting the very fabric of creation, was one being of unmatched radiance, Lucifer. He was beauty made visible, a living embodiment of divine artistry. His light painted the nascent skies with strokes of unimaginable brilliance, and his voice possessed the power to bend galaxies to his will, to sculpt nebulae with the sheer force of its resonance. When he sang, creation itself paused, hushed, and reverent, captivated by the pure, unadulterated love that poured forth from his being. And standing faithfully beside him, his closest confidant and dearest brother was Gabriel. If Lucifer was the song of heaven, then Gabriel was its very breath, the life force that sustained its melody, the wind that carried its notes to the farthest reaches of creation. He was the conduit of God's will, not merely as transcribed words, but as pure essence, a living embodiment of the divine intention. His voice was a chameleon, perfectly adapting to the Creator's desire, becoming whatever God wished it to be, whether it was a gentle whisper of comfort or a resounding declaration of power. When God spoke, Gabriel did not simply repeat his words. He became them. He infused them with his very being, amplifying their power and transmitting them with unparalleled clarity. And for eons beyond human comprehension, heaven danced to their harmonious collaboration. Lucifer, the morning star, the bringer of light. Michael, the steadfast defender, the champion of righteousness. And Gabriel, the unwavering voice, the messenger of truth. Together, they formed heaven's perfect trinity of loyalty, an unbreakable bond of devotion that sustained the very foundations of paradise until the whisper arose, subtle and insidious, threatening to unravel the fabric of their perfect world. It didn't detonate with a thunderous roar, nor did it crash through the celestial gates with a blinding flash of light. It arrived softly, gently, like a hesitant question carried on the breeze. Why does he alone receive all the glory? Why must we, who are also divine, perpetually bow before him? That single treacherous thought, planted like a seed in fertile ground, changed everything. Lucifer's melody, once flawless and pure, began to falter, a subtle tremor in its otherwise perfect resonance. His voice, though still capable of breathtaking brilliance, began to tremble ever so slightly, tainted by a darkness he could not, or perhaps would not, acknowledge. Gabriel, ever vigilant, noticed the subtle shift. He witnessed the creeping tendrils of pride weaving their way through Lucifer's radiant beauty, like shadows encroaching upon a stained glass window, obscuring its vibrant colors. He saw the dawning of self-admiration in Lucifer's eyes, a growing obsession with his own reflection, a subtle but undeniable shift in his focus away from God and towards himself. And then one fateful day, Lucifer approached him, his demeanor uncharacteristically subdued. His tone was not defiant, not yet, but gentle, almost sorrowful, tinged with a vulnerability that Gabriel had never witnessed before. "Brother," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "have you ever questioned why he created us? Why must we perpetually bow in servitude when we are already perfect, already divine?" Gabriel froze, his mind reeling. For the first time in eternity, he found himself without a message to deliver, without a divine decree to impart. No word from God resonated within him, no heavenly answer presented itself. There was only silence, a vast and unsettling emptiness where divine guidance should have been. And in that pregnant pause, that agonizing moment of uncertainty, Lucifer smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph or malice or even joy. It was a smile that concealed a deep and festering wound, a smile that spoke of unspoken pain and unacknowledged longing. It was a smile that made Gabriel's heart ache with a premonition of impending doom. "You feel it too, don't you?" Lucifer pressed, his voice laced with a fragile hope. "This unease, this dissatisfaction." Then Gabriel witnessed something that shattered his perception of heaven forever, something he had never believed possible. A tear, a single shimmering tear of pure light, trickled from Lucifer's eye. But it wasn't a tear of sorrow or empathy or even regret. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated resentment, a distillation of the bitterness and anger that had been slowly brewing within him. In that single devastating moment, Gabriel's idyllic world shattered. Suddenly, heaven, a realm untouched by pain, a sanctuary of pure bliss, felt irrevocably human, flawed, and vulnerable. He realized with a chilling certainty that even angels, those celestial beings crafted from divine light, were susceptible to doubt, to envy, to the corrosive power of pride. From that day forward, Gabriel retreated into himself, withdrawing from the celestial chorus, his voice silenced by the turmoil raging within his soul. He couldn't speak, couldn't sing, couldn't even offer a word of comfort or guidance. When the archangels gathered in heaven's grand court, he remained apart, a solitary figure, shrouded in his own private torment, breaking quietly inside as he watched the unraveling of paradise. He listened with growing dread as the tension in heaven escalated, as the divine light began to flicker and dim as the stars hesitated in their celestial song. Heaven, which had never known fear, now held its breath, anticipating a storm of unimaginable proportions. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the celestial halls. Lucifer is changing. He speaks of freedom. He questions the throne. And through it all, Gabriel remained silent, not because he was indifferent, not because he lacked concern, but because he was paralyzed by the fear of what he felt, the horrifying realization of what he was about to lose. When you love someone with the totality of your being, when you've shared eternity with them in perfect harmony, watching them slip away, consumed by darkness, feels like watching the very light of creation extinguish before your eyes. So Gabriel did the only thing he could think to do. He prayed not with the resounding voice of a herald, but with the desperate plea of a broken heart. He begged the silence for an answer, for some divine intervention to halt the impending catastrophe. But heaven remained impassive, offering no solace, no guidance, no word of comfort. Only the crushing weight of silence, a silence that tore him apart more effectively than any celestial blade ever could. He clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, God was testing Lucifer, giving him a chance to return to the light, to renounce his burgeoning rebellion and reaffirm his loyalty. But with each passing day, the light in Lucifer's eyes dimmed, further replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. He gathered followers, charismatic angels, drawn to his promises of freedom and self-determination. He built a movement, a rebellion fueled by pride and resentment. And still Gabriel waited, suspended between two opposing forces. Michael diligently sharpening his blade in preparation for war, and Lucifer meticulously honing his pride into a weapon of devastating power. And in that fragile stillness, that agonizing space between righteousness and rebellion, Gabriel shattered. One night, if such a concept could even be applied to the timeless realm of heaven, he journeyed to the very edge of creation, to the point where the vibrant light of paradise bled into the formless void of nothingness. He fell to his knees, his celestial frame trembling with anguish, and for the first time his voice, once the unwavering instrument of the divine will, faltered and broke. Father, he pleaded, his voice raw with desperation. Please, I beg you, tell me what to do. He is my brother, the closest being to my heart. Please don't let him fall. Don't let him destroy everything we have built together. But heaven remained unresponsive, a vast and impenetrable silence. Even the stars seemed to recoil, refusing to sing their accustomed melodies, as if mourning the impending loss of their brother. And Gabriel wept his tears, a testament to the profound sorrow that had taken root in his immortal soul. Angels do not cry easily. Their tears are rare and precious sacred droplets that burn with celestial light. But Gabriel's tears fell like miniature comets into the inky blackness of the void, each one carving a deeper wound of silence into the fabric of eternity. He knew with a chilling certainty what was coming. The next song of heaven would not be a hymn of praise, a celebration of creation, or a testament to divine love. It would be a war cry, a lament for paradise lost, a scream of agony that would echo through the ages. There are no wars as devastating as those fought in silence, no battles as brutal as those waged within the confines of the heart, no pain as excruciating as that which stems from watching love wither and die. Heaven, once a radiant and boundless expanse of joy and harmony, began to dim its light, flickering uncertainly, as if creation itself was holding its breath, bracing for the inevitable cataclysm. Lucifer no longer sang his voice, once the very essence of celestial music. He spoke instead, his words now imbued with a dangerous power, his pronouncements laced with bitterness and resentment. Why must we bow? Why must perfection serve? Are we not as divine, as deserving of glory as he who sits upon the throne? Each question was a spark, a tiny ember of rebellion that threatened to ignite a conflagration that would consume all of heaven. Some angels, horrified by his audacity, trembled at his voice, their faith unwavering. Others listened, their hearts captivated by his words, drawn to the pain and disillusionment that resonated within his tone. Pain, Gabriel knew, was dangerously contagious, capable of corrupting even the purest of souls. Gabriel watched from a distance, his heart aching with each word Lucifer uttered, each act of defiance he committed. Every time Lucifer spoke, it felt as though heaven was being torn apart by invisible hands, its foundations crumbling, its beauty fading. Michael, steadfast and resolute, had already taken his stance, his armor gleaming like molten fire, his eyes burning with unwavering loyalty. He warned the celestial host, urging them to resist Lucifer's seductive rhetoric. "Do not listen to the deceiver," he thundered. "His pride will be his ruin and yours if you follow him." But Gabriel couldn't bring himself to condemn Lucifer, couldn't bring himself to label him as a deceiver. Because when he looked at Lucifer, he still saw his brother, his closest friend, the being with whom he had shared countless eons of joy and harmony. He saw the radiant light that still flickered within him, however dim, and he saw the heartbreaking beauty that was being consumed by darkness. And that Gabriel realized was his curse, his agonizing burden. He could understand. Both sides could empathize with both perspectives. He understood Michael's unwavering loyalty, his unwavering devotion to God, but he also understood Lucifer's yearning, that desperate need to be seen, to be loved for what he had become, not just for what he was created to be. Because deep down, Gabriel knew, wasn't that what every creation yearned for? To be more than just a vessel, more than just a tool, more than just a reflection of the Creator's will, to possess the freedom to define oneself, to shape one's own destiny. Heaven had never known rebellion, had never experienced the corrosive effects of dissent and discord. But it had also never known heartbreak, had never tasted the bitter fruit of loss and disillusionment. And now, it was being forced to confront both simultaneously, tearing its very fabric asunder. One day, as the tension in heaven reached its breaking point, Gabriel entered the great hall, the very heart of the celestial realm, the throne's central chamber. Light danced across golden pillars, illuminating tapestries woven from starlight and dreams. The air itself hummed with divine power, a palpable energy that vibrated through every fiber of his being. Thousands of angels stood in orderly rows, their faces etched with uncertainty and fear. At the center of the hall stood Lucifer, radiant. Beyond description, his wings shimmering with an incandescent brilliance, his eyes blazing with a fierce conviction. Across from him, unyielding and resolute, stood Michael, his sword held firmly in his grasp, his gaze fixed on Lucifer, unwavering in his determination. Between them, a solitary figure caught in the crossfire of celestial conflict stood Gabriel, the messenger, the silent one, the heart torn between heaven's two hands. Lucifer raised his voice, and it echoed through the hall like thunder wrapped in melody, a sound both terrifying and mesmerizing. "We are light," he declared. "We are thought. We are divine. Yet we bow to one who hides himself in silence, who demands our servitude without offering explanation. Tell me, brothers, is this glory or slavery?" A murmur rippled through the assembled angels, a wave of doubt and uncertainty that spread through the ranks. Some looked to Michael, seeking guidance and reassurance. Others turned to Gabriel, the voice of God, desperately hoping for a divine pronouncement that would quell their growing fears. Lucifer turned his gaze upon Gabriel, his eyes softening, his voice losing its thunderous edge, replaced by a tone of palpable pain. "Gabriel, tell them," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've heard his words more than any of us. You've carried his messages to the farthest reaches of creation. Tell them why he is silent. Tell them why we must always kneel." Gabriel's lips parted, but no sound came forth. He tried to speak, to offer some word of comfort or explanation, but his throat constricted his vocal cords, refusing to obey his will. Heaven's voice, the one who had spoken for God since the dawn of time, had no message to deliver that day, no divine decree to impart, no words of wisdom to offer. He looked to the throne, to the source of all light and power, but the radiance emanating from it remained unmoving, unreadable, offering no guidance, no comfort, no hope. Only silence. Lucifer's expression hardened, his face contorting with a mixture of anger and disappointment. He took a step closer to Gabriel, his light flickering like a dying star. "You see," he said, his voice laced with bitterness, "even you don't know. Even you, the voice of God, can't explain it." Michael's wings flared, casting long shadows across the hall. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice resonating with righteous fury. "You dare challenge the Most High? You dare question his divine will?" The great hall erupted in chaos, light clashing against light, voices rising in anger and fear, faith trembling on the verge of collapse. Angels, once united in their devotion, now stood divided, their loyalty torn between two opposing forces. Gabriel stood in the center of it all, a silent witness to the unraveling of paradise, tears forming in his eyes, though none could see them amidst the chaos. For the first time in heaven's history, angels weren't singing together in harmonious praise. They were shouting against each other, their voices filled with anger, resentment, and fear. And God, the architect of their existence, still said nothing. When the assembly finally scattered, dispersing like leaves in a tempest, heaven was irrevocably changed, scarred by the wounds of division and doubt. Lucifer left the hall, not defeated, not yet, but transformed. His heart hardened, his resolve strengthened. He walked with an aura of defiance, surrounded by those who believed in his vision, those who were willing to challenge the status quo, even if it meant defying God himself. Gabriel watched him go, each fading footstep echoing like a crack across the vault of heaven. The great hall, once a sanctuary of unbroken harmony, now felt like a wound that refused to close. Angels stood in scattered clusters, their wings dimmed, their eyes clouded with questions they had never dared to ask before. For the first time since creation's dawn, loyalty was no longer instinct, it was a choice, and that realization terrified them. Gabriel turned away from the throne not in rebellion, but in rupture. The silence that had once been holy now felt heavy, pressing against his chest, like a weight he could not lift. If he spoke, whose heart would he break? If he stayed quiet, whose soul would he lose? Between Michael's blazing certainty and Lucifer's burning ache, he found nothing but a narrow ledge of grief on which to stand. So he did the only thing a broken messenger could do. He vanished. Not cast out, not struck down, simply withdrawn from the visible tapestry of heaven. While swords were forged and allegiances cemented, Gabriel disappeared into the unseen edges of eternity, carrying with him the fracture no one wanted to name. Later, when war finally split the skies and lightning carved judgment into the stars, the histories would remember Michael's victory and Lucifer's fall. But heaven would never forget the day its voice went silent. So what we've explored together isn't just a story about angels and rebellion, but a deeper look at the cost of silence, the burden of understanding, and the devastating impact of watching something you love fall apart. It's about the silent battles fought within our own hearts when faced with impossible choices, and the courage it takes to carry the weight of untold stories. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts are those unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What did Gabriel's silence mean to you? Do you think he was right to disappear, or should he have chosen a side? Leave a comment below. And let's start a conversation. I'm really interested in hearing your interpretations. And if you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of heaven and want to explore more untold stories, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future explorations into the mysteries of creation. Thanks for watching.